Good afternoon, everyone. I am Christina Wigrin with Stilly Valley Health Connections. I want to thank you for joining us for today's budget-friendly takeout class with Sound Dietitians. For everyone who's joining us live, please note that this class is set up in a Zoom webinar format. This means that all participants are muted and your videos are turned off so that we can record this presentation. If you would like to leave any questions or comments, we encourage you to do so by using the chat or Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Now I will pass it over to Kelsey from Sound Dietitians, who is back to present on today's topic. Thank you for being here, Kelsey, and thank you to those of us, or those of you who have joined us live today. We hope that you enjoyed this class.
Okay, thank you everybody, and thank you Stilly Valley Health Connections for sponsoring this budget-friendly one, our last one of this year, although we already have some planned for January. But it's a great topic tonight. It's our favorite takeout items on a budget and how to make them from home. So I thought it would be really fun to have a little cooking demo for you all. As this presentation, there's maybe not a lot of new information. If you've been attending these classes all year long, it's going to be a really great way to recap everything we've sort of learned. And you'll get some new tips and then some like recipes of exactly how we would do some swaps and just see the comparisons of making it from home versus takeout. And we'll do that webinar part after the cooking demo. But right now I'm going to make tonight some fried rice, and I'll just kind of talk about how this is budget friendly throughout, and you guys can see how it comes together pretty quickly with some prep ahead of time. I know that one of the main reasons we get takeout is because we're in a hurry, but if we apply all of the lessons we've learned over the last 11 months, hopefully we can pull some of those tips away to make a quicker version of your favorite takeout item. So I don't know about you all, but I know this time of year can be very, very busy. And I think takeout, we end up getting a lot more takeout. And I know for me at my family, it's tradition to get like Chinese food on New Year's Day. And one of our favorite recipes is fried rice, but I'm going to show you how to make the fried rice a complete meal, a one pan meal. And, so what I already did in the pan here is I put in some olive oil and I pre-chopped some carrots, and I'm just letting them saute for a little bit. And I'm actually going to throw the lid on for a second just to kind of help soften them up. But maybe while that's steaming, if anyone wants to participate in the chat box, like what are some of your go-to takeout items that you order and bring home to eat? Or maybe you just go, there's a favorite restaurant you like to go to. And so like I said, we get Chinese food on New Year's Day. In this household, we really like to get ramen, which can be extremely expensive now. Pizza, my kiddo loves pizza, so we are going to go over how to make some swaps and do that from home, and it is quite cost effective. What else? What else are some favorite go-to items for everybody? We do Chipotle as it seems the cleanest foods. Okay, so that's Chipotle can be a more nutritious option as they kind of prepare the ingredients there, and it's very quick and you can easily make substitutions. And I love that example because we are going to go over a burrito bowl tonight. But I haven't been to Chipotle in a while. Maybe you can share with us, how much does that typically cost when you go to Chipotle? Like how much is one of their burritos or one of their bowls right now? $13 for a burrito bowl. Okay, so I'm going to show you a version of how to make it. I think my example, I think it was like $3 and $7. So we'll save you some money. Although I know it's usually the end of the week and convenience of why we end up getting takeout, which serves two. Okay, that's good to know. So that's good if you're splitting it because they are quite large. So that ends up being about $6.50 per person. Okay. So this is another cost-effective way to use takeout, knowing that the portions can be bigger and if you go to a place like Chipotle or you're getting more family style servings, sometimes it can be just as cost effective to do it that way. You might be spending a few dollars more, but the convenience, you kind of have to weigh the convenience for your budget. But if it's something, maybe you get takeout like 2, 3, 4 times a week, then this would be a reason maybe to start practicing making one of those meals at home, because over time that's going to save you a lot of money. Thank you, Audrey, for sharing that. Okay, so these steamed for a little bit. Whew, hot. So I was trying to soften those up a little. And then, so the carrots do take a minute to chop. This would be maybe something you would do for your food prep, just to know you have it as an ingredient to use for different recipes throughout the week, is just having some chopped up ready recipes to go to. And then from here, I'm going to add my cooked rice. So this is just some jasmine steamed white rice. Again, I pre-cooked this earlier knowing I was going to do this for this recipe, but this is also something that can be batch cooked at the beginning of the week, or if you're making something else that you're using rice, cook up a little bit extra if you know you're going to make this dish as well, and just use the leftovers from that. I'm going to do, so when I cook, people who know my cooking style, I don't measure a whole lot. I only do when I bake. I'm going to do about 2 cups here. And this is going to be my dinner for me and my kiddos and the babysitter tonight. So I kind of want to make sure there's enough for all of us. So about 3 servings, because the kids probably eat half of a adult serving. But why we were putting the steamed cooked rice in here when we're reheating it up is it's giving it that fried texture. You guys can see that okay? Yeah. And what I love about this recipe is it's extremely versatile of what vegetables you can add to it. And it's also a good example of utilizing fresh and frozen. Remember, from one of our budget series of stocking the pantry and kind of always having some frozen or canned items on hand. And then, you know, if you have just like a couple carrots that you don't know what you're going to do with, you could chop them up and throw them in a recipe like this. I'm just gonna kind of keep soaking up that oil. But tonight the veggies we're using are carrots. I had some green beans I needed to clean out of the fridge. I had some frozen peas, like a half open bag. And then I wanted just to add more color, but this was totally not necessary. We're gonna put some tomatoes at the end. But this is also demonstrating, and we'll go over it in the presentation portion, of utilizing different ingredients that are just kind of stocking up in your refrigerator, but also having some different color and being able to add more vegetables to a recipe that you wouldn't maybe necessarily see in like the restaurant takeout setting. Although Chipotle is a great example of being able to get more veggies. I should have done this a little bit earlier. Sorry, kind of forgot. But this is my onion. Onion, when you're cooking items from home, is a great and easy, very inexpensive way to flavor your food, as is garlic, whether it's fresh or already pre-chopped for you. But those 2 items are going to add a lot of flavor to your recipes without having to have 30 different spices in here. That's the other thing, is sometimes some of these recipes call for a lot of different herbs and spices. And so we just have to figure out substitutions we can make to get that same flavor effect, but not be spending so much money and time with all the different little spices or herbs or sauces that they might call for. And we're going to just let this heat up. Speaking of sauce, and we're going to make our own kind of Asian like stir fry type sauce without buying one that's pre-made, because that tends to be a lot more expensive. So this is an example of stocking your pantry with a few ingredients if you know you like this flavor profile, and it will last a long time and be more cost effective to make kind of your own sauces with fewer ingredients, and you can control how much is going in. So I'm using tamari. You could also use soy sauce. I always have fish sauce because we do a lot of this flavor profile in our household. So I kind of keep these ingredients on hand instead of, like I said, buying a pre-made sauce for this. And this is just a little bit of fish sauce. And so those are kind of like my salty items. And then I'm going to do a sweetener of maple syrup, but you could do honey. You could do a little teaspoon of sugar, brown sugar. You know, it's going to call, like if you look up a recipe, some kind of fancy sugar. It's not necessary. We just need something a little bit sweet to put in there with our salty to kind of balance it out. And then along that line, you always will want an acid of some sort. Ours tonight is going to be this lime, but we're going to do that towards the end. So our sauce is there. This is the onions are getting nice and translucent and starting to soften up. I can smell the garlic. Normally we do these cooking demonstrations in person and my participants can start smelling the ingredients come together. So I'm sorry that you can't, but maybe it's good if you're hungry. My ratio, you can see there's a lot of carrots in there. I could probably add a little bit more rice, but it's fine. I'm going to leave it this way, but maybe if at home, if you don't want as much texture or you want to have more rice, it would be totally appropriate to do so. And then I'm going to take my sauce and put it over. The protein tonight is tofu. The original recipe calls for shrimp. You would also find like chicken fried rice, beef fried rice, any really of the proteins. I'm demonstrating with tofu tonight because our plant-based proteins are going to be more budget friendly. You do not have to do this, but I just wanted to show you all how it's done. And then also if tofu is like kind of one of those weird ingredients that are like, I'm not so sure how to use this or incorporate it, this is a really great dish to test it out with because it will just blend with the other flavors. Tofu doesn't have a ton of flavor. It kind of takes up the flavors of your other items that you're cooking with. And the texture is kind of more what gets people. So you could air fry this ahead of time or bake it if you want like a crispier. It will kind of crisp up in this pan tonight. But I just want to show you. So I pre-chopped it. I drained a little bit of water out of it. And I'm just going to throw it in here with the sauce. I don't know if you guys can hear it through my headphones, but there's a lot of sizzling. I want to keep it popping and kind of keep the moisture being sucked up because, you know, fried rice isn't super, it's usually a little bit drier. But we don't want anything to burn. So we're going to kind of keep this going. And this would come together a lot faster if I wasn't talking in between too. But really this one, if you have all your ingredients prepped or you, it should come together in like about 15 minutes. It's just the prepping that can take a little bit more time. And that's where meal prepping at the beginning of the week or making a few extra ingredients or just kind of coming up with your own recipe based off of something you have in the fridge. You don't have to follow it exactly. Just kind of use it to clean up the different ingredients that you have left over. Oh, okay. So Audrey is saying that they offer, back to Chipotle, they offer a nutritional chart so you can see what items are being in there and like manage your salt. That's great. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, and then I'm going to add my green beans. I had some left over from dinner the other night that I didn't steam up. So, but this wasn't like enough to serve as a full green bean side dish. And I'm not going to go buy more. So I'm just going to use it to mix in here. And this way I'm not throwing anything out. And so we're not wasting money. And we talked a lot about waste and how if we're trying to stretch our dollars in the kitchen and with our meals, food waste is really important to try to avoid. It's just throwing out money. And I probably should have put the green beans in a little bit earlier. I do like mine stuffed a little bit more al dente, but my kiddos may not appreciate that as much. So I'm going to throw the lid back on. Just let that steam for a second just to try to get them to soften really quickly. And then we're going to add our peas. Peas add fiber, a little bit more protein. So, and it's a veggie, well, it's a legume, but it's something more we can add to this just to give it more color, make it more veggie rich. Definitely doesn't have to be done. You know, traditional fried rice always has that scrambled eggs. So we're going to put this in there as well. I'm going to transfer it to this bigger dish and just whip it up as if I were making scrambled eggs. But this is a way to create that flavor and what you would get from a restaurant. But it also adds a little bit more nutrition of with the protein of the egg. But you're not having to cook up, if you have a family of 4, maybe like 2 eggs per person, and then all of a sudden you've used 8 eggs. So this is just a way to boost it up a little bit more. But we're like spreading out our ingredients to make a dish to serve everybody. But it's a little bit more cost effective because I know eggs are getting expensive, although of all the proteins, it's still a bargain for what an egg does provide. So I'm just whipping this up while our green beans steam a little bit. And then we're going to kind of create a well to let the egg cook. So my rice is browning, and so are my carrots, and some of the tofu edges are getting a little brown too. So it'll be nice getting that crispy effect. And I don't know if you guys can see that little well that I pushed everything up to the side of the pan. And then I'm going to throw that egg mixture in the middle so it can cook up. Just scramble it in the middle there. And something like what I love about these dishes too is you can make a really large batch of it and have it as leftovers. If you're a household of 1 or of 2 people, something like this, you could, I don't know if that it would freeze necessarily very well, and you can obviously make the portion smaller than this, but you could have it so you have it for dinner for a couple nights, or dinner and then lunch the next day. Or I've talked about if you have a neighbor or a friend, you could do some recipe swapping with. That way you're not getting like burnt out and eating the same thing, 5 nights in a row if you do want to make a bigger batch of it. And it's also nice because everything is being put into one pan. Normally I wouldn't have all my ingredients in all these different dishes. I just did it for this demo tonight to make it easier, but the cleanup is quick and nice. And I think that's another reason sometimes we get takeout, because it's like, I don't want to clean the kitchen tonight. Okay, that's cooking up. So again, it's kind of weighing the time and versus the expensive things. And tonight's presentation is more to encourage those that if you eat out more than you would like to and you're trying to figure out how to save a little bit more money in your grocery budget, usually cutting out the takeouts and the restaurant eatings is going to make a big difference, even if we do it with 1 meal a week. Okay, so now that egg is getting nice and mixed up in there in those teeny tiny little pieces as if you were getting it from the restaurant. And then we're going to add a little bit of lemon pepper. That's just because I couldn't find my regular pepper, but you would add a little pepper now if you like that and you're trying to get a little bit more flavor. I'm not doing any salt though, because tamari or soy sauce and like the fish sauce has a very salty flavor to it. So I'm not going to do that. And then I'm going to add my tomatoes just for some color, a little bit more nutrition, but definitely not necessary. I just like to, when I'm working with clients one-on-one, try to encourage them to eat the rainbow and include as much color throughout the day. So this is a really easy dish where we can kind of have fun with the different veggies and fruits that we incorporate. And then I'm gonna squeeze our lime juice to just get that acid in there to help balance out the flavors. You could also buy the pre-made juice, although like the pre-squeezed, but remembering when you're buying it in more of their original form, it's usually going to be more cost effective. But again, finding that balance of convenience and cost effectiveness, what works for your household. And then lastly, I'm doing a little bit of Thai basil just because I wanted to get that typical basil-y flavor that they have in the fried rice dishes. But you don't have to have it. And I think I might do a little bit more. This. And then I'd let it cool down and take a taste to see if I needed to add a little bit more tamari or sweetener. It's to get what they call that umami flavor, where it's a little bit of sweet and salty and not spicy per se, but it's this distinct flavor that is in a lot of different Asian dishes, and it's with that combination of the sweet and the salty and the acid ingredients. Okay, but that is done. And if I wasn't talking so much, oh, I guess I could add my peas. But you know what? I kind of like the way it looks, and we have green beans in here already. So I'm going to save my peas for another time because these can be thrown back in the freezer. And the green beans are giving kind of the same nutrients as the peas would. We already have some green. I don't want to have it just too veggie where my kids are going to be like, what are you doing to me? So I think this is a nice balance, and I'm going to leave it this way. So I'm going to turn off the stove and then we will switch over to the webinar portion. But does anyone have any questions about how that came together? Amazon. Okay, they do have some comments. Let's see here. Interesting recipe. Yeah. A special treat is takeout teriyaki. Would love to make at home, but have not found a store-bought or homemade sauce that equals restaurant. Yeah, it would take some playing around with and just experimenting with some different recipes out there to try to get that. I think the trick that I have found to try to get as close to the takeout version of teriyaki is cooking like the chicken thighs instead of breast, just because there's a little bit more fat in the thighs and it gives just a different flavor profile. But putting it in a crock pot and letting it like slowly cook and get kind of that stickiness with the different sauces that you want to try using, or just like a store-bought teriyaki, I think that gets it a little bit closer because it cooks longer. But yeah, it takes some experimentation, and it's not always going to be the same as the restaurant, especially because they're using a lot more salt, a lot more sugar, a lot more fat, depending on like what the recipes are. So yes, it might not taste exactly the same, but I encourage you to keep trying, Sean. And then Caracalla said, Amazon has authentic choices. Japanese tamari is available. Oh, okay. That's good to know that you can get some different options through Amazon that are a little bit more traditional than maybe what we can find in our average grocery store. I like that idea. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen with you all and just go over some things that if you've been attending these classes, you already know, but I think this is a good opportunity to just kind of recap at the end of the year and then just give you all a few more ideas on some of the common takeout recipes. Oh, let's see. Okay. So hopefully this, there we go. Sorry. Technical stuff. Okay. Can everybody still hear me now that I'm sharing my screen? Okay. Yes. Okay. Good. Thank you. All right. So we already did our cooking demo. Now we're going to review next some tips on smart shopping, which again, most of you will know this information. We're going to discuss some flavor budget spices and like maybe the main ones to have always in your kitchen to get kind of recreate some of those flavors without having to buy a whole bunch of different ones. And then explore popular takeout recipes and then maybe just do a little food safety at the end. So, just to kind of encourage, if you do have takeout a lot, our average cost of takeout is anywhere between $15 and $25. But to make the same version of whatever that item is typically between $3 and $6. So you can see that for some items, you could save up to 80% by cooking at home. So I like to just have these numbers here to like show if we're trying to find ways to cut costs that cooking from home can really make a big difference, and putting the different tips in practice can help speed that process up at home as well. So what are those? So being a smart shopper, remembering to look at unit prices when we're comparing different items, especially if for different stuff that we're making at home or requires like sauces. If you're buying a homemade teriyaki versus maybe the 3 ingredients to make your own, and then always having those on hand, is it more cost effective by buying the pre-made version, or maybe having a couple different ones and then you know those items are there if that's a flavor profile you like to use a lot, or even just single unit items. I think my example is always yogurt, and looking at the size of the yogurt. If even though like an 8-ounce serving of yogurt from the grocery store might be $1, but the if you look at the unit price, like per ounce, what does that break down to versus like if you were to buy it in 32 ounces? But then you have to ask yourself, would you go through that much, or would you end up throwing some away? So it's just a whole bunch of different little tips to think about when it comes to unit price to save money over the long run and what works for your household. And sometimes buying the biggest item isn't going to be the most cost effective for your household if it's something that can go bad easily and you don't go through it. Store brands are usually more cost effective than the name brand items, although sometimes the name brand items go on sale that are cheaper than the store brands. So, again, always making those comparisons. But, general rule of thumb, the store brands are going to be the similar or they're going to be the more budget friendly option. Buying in bulk, we had a whole class on buying in bulk. So that can mean one of two things. Either you're going to like the big box store items like Costco or Walmart, and you're buying like a large quantity of it, or you're using like bulk bins like at Winco and Fred Meyer, that where you can just buy like a tablespoon or a cup or however much of that item that you want. But those are definitely going to be more cost effective in the long run. And then using your weekly sales ads and using, I think we did a whole class on this of using like when they ask for your phone number, and then at Fred Meyer, if you have a smartphone and you have an app, you can even get additional deals on top of that just by scanning the item in the store. So taking a minute to go through those weekly sale ads, taking inventory of what you already have, and then making your meal plan based off of those two things, so you're not over shopping and going over your grocery budget for the week, and making a plan around what's on sale and what you already have. And then when we're talking about trying to make some of our favorite takeout items to be more cost effective, that means making certain substitutions for certain ingredients that can be very expensive. Like if beef pad thai is your chicken pad thai, even because chicken's pretty expensive too. Maybe if you're making it at home, like we did tonight, you're substituting out that meat option for a legume or a grain that has protein in it. That is definitely going to be more cost effective to make it from home. So we want to stock our pantry with some of those affordable grains, some of those affordable beans and pulses, like lentils or black beans or kidney beans, or I always have a thing of tofu in my fridge. I'm trying to think of other swaps besides those. Quinoa is a great, it's actually a seed, but we think of it as a grain, but it's a very protein rich one. So just utilizing those ingredients to bring down the cost of that recipe that you're trying to make. In the example here, using lentils to replace the meat. I'm not saying you have to do this every time. It's just if it's a way to get more nutrition, you're getting a lot more fiber and different vitamins and minerals that maybe the meat option won't have, and it's a way to just be budget friendly. But also, meat also offers different minerals that maybe you're not going to find in the lentils. So it's finding that balance and what works again for you in your household. And then dried beans are going to be the most affordable bulk option for meal planning, although it can be quite time consuming to prep them. So canned, I would say, is they work just as well, and they might be a little bit more, but still going to be cost effective and budget friendly. So, talking about spices and how some spices can be very expensive, or having to use like 50 different ones in a recipe can be a lot. There's ways to just kind of cut down on all of that. But before, I think a question popped up. Let's see. You can get shelf stable tofu to keep your pantry that you can sub for meat, and it takes on the flavor of your sauces. Yes, so any version of the tofu will definitely take on the flavor. You just might have to marinate, but I do forget about the shelf stable tofu. So thank you, Diane, for sharing that. And it's going to be something that can keep in your pantry, and that can be a nice grab and cook option if you haven't had time to like go grocery shopping, and you're going to get that protein and the nutrition. So, having certain spices kind of stocked on hand and knowing where to make substitutions can really make an effect on your budget when cooking these different dishes. So, there's some essential spices, which we'll go over in the next slide, that you use to recreate your favorite flavors. And then using like broth or the bouillon cubes to get flavor in something is also very, very handy instead of having a whole bunch of different spices and like herbs. So you make your own stock after Thanksgiving or a holiday meal because you have some of those scraps from those ingredients, and then you can throw that in the freezer and then pull it out to like steam up your rice with instead of water, and you're going to get more of that salty herby flavor without having to go buy a whole bunch of fresh herbs again, or add a whole bunch of extra salt or something like that. So broth is a great hack and easy to have on hand and easy to like substitute for when it calls for water. Budget friendly alternatives, experience with spices for more diverse meals. So this is like maybe Indian food is like something that you like to get as your takeout because it's not something you have a cabinet full of the different spices. But maybe you go and you buy some of the few common ones in bulk, and you start experimenting and cooking with that, and then having that on hand. But you don't have to have, because there can be quite a few spices in Indian type dishes, but maybe you just get the main ones or some pre-blend ones and then make your own, and it can help you save money in the long run than getting takeout if you experiment making it yourself at home. And then homemade seasoning mix. So like I used lemon pepper that was pre-mixed together, but I could technically make that own blend and probably would be a lot less money than that jar was probably $5 or $6 if I would have just gone to a bulk section at Sprouts or Winco and like bought each individual spice and like mixed up my own. Like steak seasonings, those can be really expensive. That would be a good one to substitute and make your own Italian seasoning, just buying the few dried herbs individually and then mixing it up on your own. Those ones can tend to be a lot more money, but when you individually buy the ingredients, take the few minutes it would take to mix them together, it can be quite cost effective over the long run. So these are kind of our powerhouses, the ones I would recommend kind of always keeping in your pantry if you only want to have a few on hand. Garlic powder, it adds that rich flavor without the fresh hassle of the garlic. So yes, tonight I chopped up the fresh garlic, but I could have easily, and I have my fingers might smell like garlic right now, and it would have saved me time if I would have just used like a half of a teaspoon to a teaspoon of the garlic powder. Remembering that the powder version is going to be a lot more flavor dense. And so you don't, if it calls for like 4 tablespoons or 4 cloves of garlic, you're not going to need that much in the dried version. It's going to be a lot stronger. Same with your onion powder, which is our second kind of powerhouse ingredient. Gives it that savoriness, very easy way to flavor foods. And again, saves you the time and maybe the tears of chopping up an onion. Chili powder, it can add a little bit of heat and depth to various meals. It's very common in a lot of different pre-seasoning mixes. And I would say pretty versatile across different types of flavor profiles and dishes that we might order out, as well as cumin. I think a lot of people think of this being used maybe in like taco seasoning, but it can be used in like Italian food. It can be used in Thai food. Very, very versatile, and it adds like warmth and an earthy flavor to your dishes. And then salt and pepper are also common ones that we typically would have on hand to add your basic flavors to. So something again, this is going to be review, but batch cooking for easy meals. So we kind of already talked about when I was talking about how I would maybe batch cook this meal, but it'd be more like batch cooking my single ingredients. So like the rice, having that pre-cooked. Maybe if I had some veggies chopped up for another meal, I'd push some aside, knowing that I'm going to save it for this one. Um, if like spaghetti, instead of ordering Italian food out, I think that's a very cost effective, very, very easy one to make in big batches, or at least the sauce making in big batches and then cooking up your noodles fresh. And you can make it a meat sauce, you can make it just a tomato sauce, but easy to cook a portion and then put a portion in the freezer. Lots of examples we could go through with this, but just remembering that the batch cooking individual ingredients, or a dish like spaghetti where you can make a lot of it and freeze half of it, this is going to save you a lot of time in the long run and makes it so you have something available, so you are less likely to order that takeout out of convenience, because you ran out of time to make a meal, and then you're spending up to 80% more. So some budget-friendly homemade takeout options. We already kind of did like an Asian style one. We're gonna go over a Mexican recipe, but to make a burrito bowl, and then Italian. I think people usually think of pizza or pasta, and then chili. I don't think we're gonna go over this one per se, and I don't know that this one is necessarily one that we order as takeout, but it is easy to batch cook and have in the freezer, if have it on hand if it's like one of those nights where you're like, I just don't want to cook, I'm just going to order takeout, but then you remember like, oh yeah, I have chili in the freezer, I can just thaw that out and heat it up right away and eat it. This is someone very organized with this refrigerator or freezer, but I wouldn't say that any of our freezers will ever look like this. However, having it labeled, having it when you made it what it is, makes it very, very easy to pop it out and use it, and making sure something's not in there for too long and then we end up throwing it away. So a homemade Mexican burrito bowl. So like the Chipotle, or if you're doing like a one wrapped in a tortilla, but this is more cost effective to do it as the bowl. Have your starch be the rice, and it makes kind of speedier because you can, well, I guess the tortilla it's easier to wrap stuff up in, but it will be more cost effective, and something you can batch cook ahead of time. And when I like looked up average costs, so average cost from a restaurant, if you're to do this bowl version, is like $10 to $14. I think our participant shared that it was $13, but they were dividing it in two. So that's actually making it pretty cost effective. You can get 2 meals out of that. But our homemade version is anywhere from $1.80 to $3.50, kind of depending on what you put on it. So it is a fraction of the cost. Some things to focus on is using is pre-cooking it, the bulk cook of rice, using some black beans, whether it's fresh or from the can, and then a salsa. You can easily make that on your own, and it doesn't have to be one of the pre-made ones, or you could use a pre-made one that is like a shelf-stable one, and is going to be less like per unit cost. And then protein, using like ground turkey or a lentil bean mix, are going to be probably more your cost efficient proteins to add to some a dish like this. And then different toppings, you can think of like your canned corn, your canned green chilies, or some chopped onion. And then if you're trying to save money, avoid the pre-shredded cheese, just because they charge you for that convenience, and it's pretty easy to shred it yourself from the block. And then buying homemade or buying guacamole versus making it at home, like, it's quite more expensive. Avocados are expensive. Avocados, I don't want to discourage it though either, are a nutrition powerhouse in themselves. So if they're on sale, or if it's within your budget, just either making your own guacamole to put on top, or just having maybe some fresh sliced avocados can add a lot of nutrition to the dish. But buying, and it's going to be a lot more cost effective than buying like the pre-made guacamole. But this would come together very quickly. If your rice is already prepped, you just have to heat it up, and then the rest you're kind of just rinsing and chopping and throwing on top. So I did a fried rice, but this is a stir fry example, and I love a stir fry. You can buy your cheap veggies that are kind of cheap year round, your carrots, your cabbage, your onions, and then like your frozen mixed veggies. Those usually don't change price throughout the year, and easily throw them in a pan, saute them with some oil, and then choose your protein. And then maybe have some rice on the side, or some kind of noodle or something. But this comes together very, very quickly. If you get creative with your sauces, or you just throw in some garlic maybe in there, you don't even need a sauce if you don't want to, but you could also just do like a little soy sauce or something like that, and then you'll get something pretty close to what your takeout version is, and it can come together very, very, very quickly. A sauce hack is adding some soy sauce, honey or sugar, and some coarse cornstarch, and that's going to kind of give you that thicker sauce. And then it will save you the money in buying the pre-made sauce. But a homemade typical chicken stir fry costs about $2 to $3 per serving. Where I feel like if I were to order something similar like this where I live, I feel like it's like anywhere from like $15 to $18 now. I do usually typically get 2 servings out of that, but it's still cheaper to make it per serving at home. Pizza, I feel like this is a very, very popular dish to get as takeout, but you can make it at home, and it can kind of be something that's kind of fun if you have kids at home that want to help cook, and you're trying to get them in the kitchen a little bit more. You can either buy like your own crust that you just build stuff on top of, or making your own pizza dough is very inexpensive to do. You just have to plan ahead, because you are going to be using some yeast, and you have to give it some time to do that rising. But if it's something that you can prep in the morning and just let it do its thing while you're at work, and then you come back and then and make your dough, and then put your sauce on top, and then choose whatever tomatoes that you want, or tomatoes toppings that you want to do. And it gives you a little bit more control because you can add a little bit more veggies to make it more nutrient dense. And you're going to get some protein from the cheese that you put on it, and maybe you choose one other protein option to go with it, just to make sure you're getting enough protein for the meal. And but the based on ingredients cost for like a medium to a large size, if you're making it at home, like the equivalent to like a 12 or 16 inch, is anywhere from $3.50 to $7. So I feel like ordering just like your basic cheese pizza right now is like 20 bucks for a 12 or 16 inch, kind of depending on where you go. And there's like nothing else that you're putting on top of it. So, and this can be something really fun to do. And then, as I kind of already touched on, and I'm sure many of you know just from attending other classes, but when you are cooking stuff at home, you are allowed to control the ingredients that are being put in. And also, why things taste so good at a restaurant is there's just a lot more sodium than one would normally cook with, and a lot more like fat. And again, fat's not bad. It's just like, what's the source of it and how much are we using? And so when we do it at home, you get that control back, and you know what's going in it, especially if you have health conditions where you're worried about having to pay attention a little bit closer to these ingredients. It's going to be a safer bet to cook it at home. And then also you can increase your fiber intake, because like pizza, if the example, like you have the opportunity to add a lot more veggies. The rice that I made tonight, that would typically probably come with just like a little bit of peas and some carrots is usually how I see it, but I added like 3 different other things in there to increase the veggie intake, and which increases your fiber and just vitamin and minerals. I saw a comment. Someone sharing that we substitute the pizza dough with store-bought bread and throw in the fresh canned ingredients and bake ready to serve. Yeah, that's great. I think I've made with English muffins before. So you don't even, yeah, if you don't have time to do the dough, and you already have some bread, that you can totally do that. That's great. I love that. Thank you for sharing. Portions are also a big difference between ordering food out versus making it at home. So you can really control what you're putting on your plate. It's very easy to overeat at a restaurant or the takeout portion, just because they serve a lot more than you need. So unless you're like, I'm getting this, I'm dividing it in half because I know that's all I need for this one meal and saving the rest for later. It's very, very easy to just be like, oh my gosh, this is so good, and kind of be eating fast and overriding those signals of like your body saying that you're full. So again, another reason why cooking something from home versus eating out is going to have a few more benefits. But just thinking also too of like what's going on your plate and making sure you're still getting a balanced meal. You have like the example on the left here, bottom left, there you have half of their plate is the different vegetables, and then we have our protein source and our whole grain source. And so this is a really balanced meal as far as nutrition goes. And again, with the same with the picture over here in the divided of the plates, so we can really control what we're putting on and what we're going to take in when we make it from home. And because we're making it home, or even if you get takeout and it's sitting out for a little while, just remembering the 2-hour rule. Refrigerate perishables within 2 hours after cooking. You don't want them to sit out a long time and start growing that bacteria that can make you sick. And then reheating the food that you made, or if you got takeout, making sure that it's very hot when you re-steam it up or reheat it up, making sure it's like up to that 165 degrees is going to be important, just to make sure you're not getting any foodborne illnesses. But these are just a couple rules of thumb. So some key takeaways tonight, and just kind of for the year with this budget series, is just remembering, use unit prices, look at them, take a moment to compare and just see what is the better option for you and your household. Batch cooking as much as you can, whether it's the single ingredients or a whole dish and then freezing some of it, or maybe sharing some with a neighbor and doing a little swap. Using your legumes and your grains to swap out for maybe some of the meat options. Maybe you only do it once a week uh, to help lower the cost for that protein option. Just because we all know that our meat and poultry is just very expensive right now. Can knowing that when you make stuff from home, you can really control the amount of sodium and fat that you're putting into the dish. And then always remembering, and I try to say this at the end of every presentation, is just start with one dish that if you're eating out multiple times a week and you're like, okay, I would like to cut back on this because I know it's gonna add up and save me money if I can. Just start with one and still get takeout. It's okay. It can be a part of your budget, but pick one thing that you want to start playing around with and mastering and experimenting, knowing that it will taste just as good and you can make it just pretty fast to make it worth your time instead of getting that takeout version. So for the person that shared the teriyaki one, I encourage you to keep looking for ingredients and see if you can master that to get it close and convenient to what you prefer. And I believe, yep, that is all I have for you tonight. Thank you for joining. Happy holidays. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll see you guys in January. Thank you, Audrey. And Christina, do you have anything else for the group?
No, I was just waiting to see if any questions come in, but it looks like everyone has everything answered. You did a great job. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. There will be a quick 6-question survey as you exit tonight's class. If you guys have any feedback or if you have any ideas for next year's series, we will be back in 2026, and we are still working on those ideas. So definitely leave some responses for us, and we'll take those into consideration.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, everyone have a good night. Thank you again, Kelsey, and
Yep.
we will see you next year.
Yeah. Happy holidays, everybody.
Happy holidays.